Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
That is right, my friends. Conservative, not bitter. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here today. Folks, you got the email. If you don't have the email, you can email me your thoughts, questions, feedback. Adoration and praise will always be accepted at that email. Kidding, not kidding, todd@toddhuffshow.com. Friends, the battle is getting intense out there. It's been intense for a while. In fact, it's got me thinking today's Todd Talk was kind of about that. I'll build on that as we start today's program. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not going away. You've got these members of the Texas legislature who have fled to Illinois. They've got until Friday before Abbott says he's coming after their positions. He's asking that they be removed from office from abandoning their post. Look, I get it. I know that this is not what anybody really wants to deal with here. But the reality is, my friends, that this country has been put in the position that it's put in because of how we've allowed these types of politicians to basically throw temper tantrums in some cases, abuse their powers in some cases, ignore their voters in some cases, and do heaven knows what else with the elections in some cases. I'll get to that time permitting as well, my friends. But that's where I want to start today. Appreciate you being here. By the way, my friends, maybe you've reached the stage, that stage in life that some people reach where managing your money feels like juggling more than just numbers. There's the tax planning side, estate work, investment choices, and a whole lot more. That's when something called family office services can be really helpful, can really make a difference for you and your family. Full Suite Wealth brings all those pieces together into one cohesive strategy. Their family office services give you access to a coordinated team with advanced options strategies, private equity, private credit, and legal expertise, all under one roof. It's all about simplifying your financial life, planning for your future, and making sure your legacy stays strong for generations to come. If that's the place where you are, you're exploring those things, and you're ready for that level of support, visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. All right, let's give an update here on the status of where we are. The Epic Times headline here: Texas Attorney General says he'll seek to remove Democrats who don't return by Friday. Attorney General Ken Paxton said he will go to the courts in an attempt to declare Democrats who fled the state, this says state, but I'm smart enough to know there should be a T in there, they fled the state as having abandoned their elected office. That's ultimately what this is about, my friends. You might have seen, in fact, I've got a soundbite here. I think I do. It's going to take me a minute to pull it up. I'd forgotten about this as I'm going through the show prep, but I have a soundbite of one of the leaders of the Texas Democrats in Illinois making a comment about, we didn't, I forget exactly what he said. We didn't basically abandon our post. We're standing up for the people of Texas. That's not what's happening. All of this is completely legal. In fact, you may have seen some of these district maps floating around.
5 gray states. These are
That's not supposed to happen. I had that connected. I didn't want you to hear that. But the states, there are some real precarious maps that are drawn. Some really interesting maps. And a lot of these are Democrat maps. Now, some people will tell you that the reason the Democrats are so upset about this, of course, is, the double standard is obviously the first thing that you have to think about. The double standard that exists here. Democrats are cool. And you could say that, you could make the claim, too, Republicans are cool when they do something that gives them an advantage. But when they get caught on the losing side of that, they want to push back and fight back. Texas has found a way to potentially get 5 more red seats in Texas, and that's unacceptable to Democrats. They don't want that. And I understand that, but instead of trying to think about this, they're not persuading anybody. They're not giving people any reason to vote for them. That's not how they respond to this. They don't say, hey, if you're in these districts, because by the way, these districts, they might be drawn to give an advantage to the people that are in power to try to win, more seats in Congress. But the reality is that you still have to win these elections. The reality is that if the Democrats were not hemorrhaging support from Hispanic voters, this would probably not be possible or as possible. I heard a commentator on maybe CNN making this case. I've got that soundbite with us here today as well that I might play. But she basically says, look, if Democrats were trying to, if they were effectively winning back or not losing the Hispanic vote, this wouldn't even be possible. And this is the Republicans betting that the gains they've made with Trump of Hispanic voters is going to continue. So it's a gamble of sorts. If they lose that support, they'll potentially lose these districts, which could become blue districts. We don't necessarily know. It's not a guarantee. It's not in the bag, although statistically I understand exactly it is designed to do that, and that's part of the process. This is a political thing. This is exactly how this should work, not the fleeing the state by the Democrats, but Republicans are completely, in the state of Texas, completely within their authority and power to do the sort of thing that they're doing here. And I'm going to say this, too. If the Supreme Court strikes down, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, you can see potentially a whole lot more of this. See, that I would argue that the Voting Rights Act, again, if you go back to that quote I read to you, that very disgusting quote I read from you from Lyndon Baines Johnson yesterday, our 36th president of the United States, who was one of the most vulgar, vile human beings that's been in the office of the presidency. He said he was going to, through the Voting Rights Act, have black Americans voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Basically saying that he was, you can read between the lines there, but the idea was to do what needed to be done to secure a voting bloc that they could rely upon. And candidly, Democrats have relied upon a very high percentage of black voters for a long time. And this is, then once they did that, and then they created the Voting Rights Act, and this was all kind of done simultaneously, what ends up happening is they create those voter blocks, and then they say you can't draw districts that break up those voting blocks, so they secure a protective sort of protection around the districts where their block of voters can stick together and elect representatives. And then they want to prevent Republicans from effectively doing the same, crying racism and everything else, when this is a political exercise. This is a political exercise. And by the way, if they want to if they want Republicans to pay a consequence, maybe they've decided in the state of Texas Republicans should pay a consequence, and you can fight that out in the political process. Make that part of your campaign. See, there will be some people who agree with you. There will be some who won't. Maybe one of the districts has enough people think, hey, I typically like Republicans. I'm kind of middle of the road, but you know what? I'm not down with how they drew these districts. I'm going to support Democrats. That's certainly part of the case. You can make the case politically. This is a political thing. As I talked about yesterday, there's not a divinely given order as to where the line is around a congressional district, at least where it should be. These things are arbitrary. Yes, I get that when you start drawing real skinny and long districts, and you can see maps of some of these districts that try to connect certain cities, and they just kind of gerrymander is the term. They just kind of bob and weave all over the place, connecting one district or one part of the state to another that has a propensity to vote in a certain way, and so they'll carve these out. Illinois is terrible at this. They've done this with Chicago. They take Chicago and they take slices of Chicago and just move it outward and absorb parts of the suburbs where people have maybe a higher propensity to vote Republican, but they outnumber each of these districts with the residents inside the blue city of Chicago, and it's hard for Republicans to win. I've done this show for nearly 10 years. Actually, here in 4 days, we'll have to celebrate on Friday because I guess technically that'll be on Sunday. Sunday is our 10th anniversary here at the Todd Huff Show. But if you go back through the archives, you will not find me in one single episode in 10 years bemoaning and whining about the gerrymandering done in blue states that basically stack the deck for Democrats to win more congressional districts. You won't hear me do that. I might not like it. I might say it's crazy that certain, some of these shapes of these districts, this doesn't make any sense. But again, at some point, it has to be arbitrary. I mean, is a square, should we go with squares and rectangles? Is there ever an instance where you have to make it a little bit of a different shape? Because, again, you got to have the same number of people approximately in all of the congressional districts. By the way, Indiana's now on the map. Indiana has now been identified. There's typically 2 blue districts in Indiana. One, of course, is Indianapolis. That's, of course, currently occupied by Andre Carson, grandson of Julia Carson. That's all he had. I remember the signs. I remember when Julia, his grandmother, was running for that district, and she had been the representative there for some time. The yard signs literally said, "I heart Julia." I love Julia. We don't know Julia. We just love her. We don't know what she's doing. I had a friend who had a meeting with Julia Carson in D.C. who told me she showed up barefoot to the meeting. Let that sink in. But anyway, I think she had hose on. I think she had taken her shoes off, but she was barefoot in the meeting. But that's a generational thing. The Carson name is well known and loved in that district, and that's all that you need. And so, but Indianapolis here isn't gerrymandered. The district could be drawn in such a way to do exactly here in Indiana what they've done in Chicago, which is dilute the Democrat vote by getting out to the suburbs and putting more of the voters in the suburbs. There's a district in northwest Indiana, which is a suburb of Chicago, that's also a blue district. Those are the only current blue districts in the state. There's 9 districts. 7 of them are Republican. 2 of them are Democrat. And so, look, there's a movement. Trump and his team are organizing a movement to win elections for years to come. And I know that this is, to some people, maybe just a little bit much. This, by the way, is the time you have to redraw these districts. Because, you get to the census time and they may vanish and change anyway. We'll have new districts based upon the population and the allocation of districts. Apportionment is what it's called. But anyway, so you got this fight. Indiana, there's other red states that are now going to be pursued. They're going to have Trump and his team come and say, look, redraw this district so that we could get a seat here, a couple of seats there. And this is, again, the political prerogative of the legislatures who are in power. It's going to get ugly. There's going to be more fleeing the state borders and so forth. I told you, as these folks have their tantrums, but there is this is completely legitimate. It may come with political consequence, but there really is no objective way to do this. Anyway, that being said, I told you I was going to play a soundbite. This is from one of the Texas Democrats who's fled the state of Texas. He's in Illinois, Representative Ramon Romero Jr., and he's out here trying to, again, this is now, they've done the political stunt. They're Dramocrats being Dramocrats. I alluded to the fact that something like this happened in Indiana years ago, where the Democrat delegation in the State House fled to Illinois. I can't remember what that particular vote was about. That might have been back when Pence was governor. It might have been back when Mitch Daniels was governor. I'd have to think about that for a moment. But they fled to Illinois, which is apparently a safe haven for little Democrats who are throwing temper tantrums because they don't have political power in their state to stop what the majority is going to be doing. And so they're trying to now win this battle of information. They're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to tell you that this is about saving the democracy. You'll hear language like that from these folks as they defend and explain this. Standing tall, not going to be complicit, defending our democracy, got to stop the fascists. That's the narrative here. When the real correct narrative is, hey, elections have consequences. This is totally within the power of the legislature, the majority party. They may face political consequences for having drawn some districts that people find objectionable. Make that case. But to say they can't do it, especially when you flee to a state that has done it, that's perhaps the greatest irony of all here, is that they have fled to a state that has specifically sought to do this. Now, you've heard me say in the past, like, I don't want to, you won't hear me argue for things that Democrats do that are immoral and illegal. When we get power, you won't hear me saying now it's time to do that. However, this is not immoral or illegal what Texas is doing. This is political hardball. This is something that a lot of politicians want to steer clear of, drawing these districts like this to intentionally try to get as many red districts as possible. But there's nothing immoral or illegal about this. We're playing for keeps here. We're playing for the survival of this nation. Again, if the Titanic is sinking, my friends, if the Titanic is sinking and you got massive problems to deal with, and to me, getting upset at Republicans doing this is like getting upset with someone who yells a curse word as the ship's going down, and then you feeling the need to stop them and, rebuking them or telling them they shouldn't be using that type of language when there's clearly bigger problems at the moment. We've got bigger problems at the moment. And again, there's nothing illegal, nothing immoral about this. This is, again, playing what I would call political hardball. That being said, the narrative is key. How this is being framed is key. And I want you to hear, this is Texas. There may be a couple of people in this clip. I've got a couple of clips. But the first one you're going to hear from is Representative Ramon Romero Jr. of Texas, trying to make this narrative fit what Democrats are trying to tell us in the broader sense, what the fight against Republicans and the fight against MAGA is, which is a fight for the survival of our democracy, as they would say. Here it is.
So right now, there's folks saying that, and I think everyone behind me will say, we're standing up, and as Texans would say, we're standing tall.
Standing up and standing tall.
There's others that are saying and warning us that they're going to arrest us or make us pay fines. Mm-hmm. I'll pay that price for America.
Who's going to pay? Pause
And
that. You know what? Let's take a bet as to who's going to pay this stuff. Well, I shouldn't say that completely. If it's a small fine, maybe these folks who may have made some money out of their political powers and connections and so forth, maybe they can pay it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Soros is back there in the background with a open checkbook, ready to pay whatever fines may be thrown their way. He continues here.
Everyone behind me would say they would do the same.
No, they're so tough. Heroes.
That would be a very small price to pay for what we would save for these Americans that have fought so hard and against the maps that aim directly at black and brown voices.
Except that's not true. That's not true. In fact, this representative, Mr. Romero here, should be reminded that Trump is winning with Hispanics. Some of these districts are going to be majority Hispanic, as I understand it. Your party, Mr. Romero, has lost these voters, and for good reason, I might add.
Tomorrow marks 60 years since the Voting Rights Act was signed into law, and that law that was born out of sacrifice of people bleeding, marching, and even dying for the right to vote. And now here we are one day before that anniversary, watching Trump try to destroy it.
Oh, mercy.
So right now...
Mercy. What's he talking about? No one's taking away anybody's right to vote. This is pure sophistry and nonsense. Friends, you've heard me share with you, this has happened, I believe, one other time. Maybe this might be the second. This could be the third time, but MyPillow's had a battle with some of their larger retailers, and one of those retailers had just canceled a large order that they had placed with MyPillow, and that means they've created, they've got inventory of their classic collection, and since the order was canceled by the retailer, MyPillow is going to extend wholesale prices to you, and you can get these directly. So you can get wholesale prices for standard MyPillows. You can get wholesale prices for queen-size MyPillows, king-size MyPillows. You can get body MyPillows, and you can also get multi-use MyPillows. All of these are at wholesale prices until these are sold. You can go to MyPillow.com for more information. Use my name, Todd, during the checkout process, and you will get those savings and discounts on other products as well. MyPillow.com, promo code Todd. Quick time out, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You know, when you have no moral roadmap, when your ideology is built on sinking sand, when you're a professional sophist, when you're a dramacrat, and currently all they do is engage in this sort of behavior, you don't really have any solid ground, any logical reasons for doing anything that you're doing. And speaking of that, I'm going to now tell you about Representative Al Green. Al Green is one of the biggest lunatics in Congress. Al Green, if you go back to Trump's first term, 11 days into office, Al Green started calling for impeachment officially from the House floor. Al Green is involved in all sorts of calls. I think he's already done it again in this term for Trump. There's nothing Al Green likes more than impeaching Donald J. Trump. This guy is a leftist lunatic. He is unhinged. He makes no sense. He's a professional deceiver, a professional dramacrat. And so now they've got another, Democrats in particular, elected Democrats. Republicans might do this sometimes. Democrats just do this stuff more often. Democrats are more focused on performance art, and it's bad. It's really bad performance art, but they're more inclined to really try to sell the insanity of their positions and arguments. And often what they do is they'll test in real time. They'll test different responses, different arguments that they're making. I just shared with you what the group now, Al Green is in Illinois. He's joined, he and Jasmine Crockett, another lunatic leftist, who are members of the U.S. Congress from Texas. They're not part of this Texas group of state legislatures, but they've joined them, right? They've joined them in Illinois to support one another, to try to make a case, to try to get political support for opposing these congressional districts. And you've already heard what Representative Romero said. I played that previously. He said that they're here to stand tall as Texans. They're here to stand up, not to sit down, blah, blah, blah. They're going to pay the fines. It's worth the cost because Trump is trying to make sure that black and brown people can't vote, basically, is what they're arguing. And what makes us even ultra ironic is that this happened on the eve of the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, which was federally passed legislation. So Al Green takes to the podium. Anytime Al Green shows up, you better be ready for, who knows what you're going to hear. But he's got another line of argument here. He's saying that it's wrong because Texas is dealing with other problems. In particular, you'll remember the tragic flooding that hit the state here recently, the loss of life, and just the tragedy that came with these flash floods that, again, were destructive and caused a lot of loss of life. And so apparently, if you're dealing with the fallout of a major tragedy like that, the government only has the ability to focus on one thing at a time. I wish Democrats would take this same logic and apply it when they were in power. I wish they could only focus on one insane liberal or leftist idea at a time, because our country would not be as far off the rails today as it is if they had to deal with one issue at a time. So he's out there saying this is, it's wrong. It's morally wrong, I guess, to be dealing with this because of the tragic loss of life in the flash floods. Previously, of course, we've been through that. We talked about that a lot on this program. So that's Al Green, his argument, and I'll let you hear it for yourself. Here he is.
What the governor is doing in Texas is wrong. What is wrong with you, governor? What is wrong with you? You've had babies to lose their lives.
This is so...
Families are suffering. And you are trying to redistrict Texas? You make this your number one item on your scorecard? What is wrong with you, governor? Yes. You ought to be ashamed. Yes. Somebody's got to call you out. We're going to call you out now, and I believe we'll call you out in November of next year.
Right. And that's fine. And that's fine. Listen, I want to be clear here. I'm mocking this faux outrage. It's tragic what happened. It's absolutely tragic. But to go after the governor for trying to do something else, I mean, what else is supposed to be done? What is the logic here? Something tragic happened, right? Terrible. Absolutely horrible. I talked a lot about this on this show. It's awful stuff. It's terrible what happened. So why should the business of the state completely stop because there's a tragedy? There have been tragedies throughout American history. One of the first things I remember is the tragedy of the space shuttle, I want to say Columbia, what was the Challenger, Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986 blowing up. Tragic. We didn't stop all operations because the space shuttle blew up, but it was horrible. There were school kids that watched that all around the country explode as they watched the Challenger live on television being launched. I remember we were watching this stuff. 1986, that's almost 40 years ago, 39 years ago. So Is there a period of time that the government should have not done anything else but mourn the challenger? I mean, what does that even mean? I know it might sound good to people, but the government has to continue to operate. On the day I shared with you, my son and I, when we went to Austin, Texas, 1960, well, we didn't go in 1963. We went a couple weekends ago, but in 1963, JFK was assassinated. JFK was assassinated. Terrible, horrible stuff. We don't even have all the answers to what happened here. Today, Trump has released some more files. They may have released all, I don't know where that stands, but we haven't had all the answers. Even if they release all the files, I don't know that we'll ever have all the answers. A lot of very questionable things happened in the days leading up to the day of that assassination, and of course, the things that happened in the wake of that assassination. But I remember there's a picture of LBJ getting sworn in. I shared this on this program. He's being sworn in on Air Force One with Jackie Kennedy wearing the same exact dress that she had on. It was the same day of the assassination. She was standing next to LBJ. They wanted to make sure that she was included in that just for the optics of, that she was united and that this was the right thing to do. She was in shock. Friends, I believe that there was, this is graphic, so if there's little kids, please cover the ears, but I remember that there was, I believe, brain matter from JFK that was found on that dress. She's still in the dress. That's terrible. Should they not have sworn in LBJ? We have things, and I understand. I'm not saying that some things aren't on the same level of a timeline of getting accomplished. I'm just saying what should happen. Ironically, when there's a tragedy that Democrats want to use for their political advantage, say a terrible, awful shooting, they immediately that day start complaining about gun laws and that sort of thing, and they want to change those, take away Second Amendment rights of American citizens and so forth. This is not real. This guy is a pure sophist. He is not to be taken seriously. The tragedy is real, but using the tragedy to try to stop someone who's in the political opposition from doing something, not the day of this stuff. This is in the past. It wasn't, I don't know how far into the future you have to go before in Al Green's mind. See, I would think he would say this forever. I mock his screaming not because of what he's purporting or acting like he's screaming about. I mock it because, my friends, it's not real. He's a sophist. He's not serious. He should not be taken seriously. Friends, I want to tell you really quickly, remind you, Freedom Marketplace is our online conservative directory. It's a place where you can find conservative businesses that are pushing in the same direction you are. You don't have to worry about spending money with these businesses, and then they take that money out the back door and support leftist candidates and leftist causes. We've created this marketplace where you can find businesses that have pledged not to do that. It's freedommarketplace.net. It's free for you to use. If you're a business, you can reach out to us if you're interested in listing there. You can even send me an email, todd@toddhuffshow.com. But I've got to take a break, my friends. Quick time out. You're listening to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I've got one more clip I want to play for you. CBS News has sat down with a couple of these, 3 of these it looks like. At least that's what I see in this clip. Sat down with James Tallarico, Ann Johnson, John Busey, in Illinois, because they fled, of course. They've run like cowards, I guess. I don't know who else flees. What are they fleeing? They're fleeing having to vote. They're fleeing their constitutional authority or their responsibility to be legislators. Get in there and make your argument. Get in there and try to persuade people. Don't flee to the state of Illinois, Governor Pritzker, and the other corrupt politicians. You got lots of options for corrupt politicians there. Don't do that. Go fight your battles. And they're being asked about being arrested, and they're going to give you some ridiculous answers, which I'll get to here in just a moment, my friends. You know, one of the biggest challenges we as conservatives have is finding ways to ensure that our values align with the things that we do. Of course, that can mean professionally. That can mean in our private lives. That also means how we invest. That's why I love what the team at 48 Financial is doing. They specialize in what they call biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that do not align with our faith, the Christian faith, and values, so that we're not funding things that go completely against what we believe in. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense if there's a way to find out if my investments are supporting things that I find biblically reprehensible, then I would at least want to know that. And you would think I would have a desire to try to prevent that from happening. And that's what they're trying to do here. And I know there's a lot that goes into investing, but what they do is they do the heavy lifting for us so that they give us these tools and ways to know if our investments are aligned with our purpose, our goals, our beliefs. So you can jump online, 48financial.com/Todd, and you can complete an assessment for totally for free to see where your current investments, what those investments are supporting, the companies that you're investing in. Again, that's 48financial.com/Todd. It's totally free. I've done this. It's painless. It doesn't take very long. 48 Financial, because our money should work for our values. All right. Got a little time left here. I want to play this. CBS anchor is here sitting down asking these Democrats really about the possibility of being arrested. And here's how that went.
Governor, the Attorney General say they may seek your arrest. You willing to go to jail over this?
We knew there were going to be consequences. And I think all of us know that this is bigger than us as individuals. It's bigger than the jobs we have. We are fighting for the American experiment. We are fighting for representative democracy and whether or not that will continue. And so we're willing to face whatever consequences may come our way.
But also want to make sure people recognize this threat of arrest, this is not normal. Do not think that we can turn into a nation where you arrest and jail your political opposition for not only rendering their voice for the people, but doing something that is protected by the Texas Constitution. A quorum break is written into the Texas Constitution. It is a tool our founding fathers gave us. The threat of arrest is something that should be a red alarm for a lot of folk.
So she's claiming here, this is Representative Ann Johnson, that this is constitutionally protected. A quorum break. I guess you can just, I mean, these are the, I don't know the level of detail regarding this with the state of Texas, but I can just tell you that if Paxton is threatening to take action and if Abbott is threatening to take action, they have legal grounds to stand on. This is not just that they're trying to force them back from a recess or avoid them having some sort of a recess. This is them fleeing the state to avoid having a quorum. This is, you want to talk about interfering with our democracy, behaving in such a way so as to prevent the legislature from meeting as it should. Now, if there's something here that says the legislature doesn't have to meet or shouldn't be meeting, I don't expect that. Listen, I've dealt with these folks, followed them, talked about this sort of stuff for a long time. The odds that this is something that Republicans are preventing, that's a recess or a break or whatever, that they're not giving them, I think is probably the chances of this being legit and not being manipulated and lied about by these folks is near 0%. I won't ever say 0%, but I'm going to say 0.01% or some such thing. This is them fleeing the country, well, the state, in order to prevent the party that was elected by the state, by people in the state, from doing what they were elected to make, to do, the decisions that they were allowed to make. I'll play a little bit more of this, and I'm going to have to wind down here.
Greg Abbott is trying to silence the voices of Texans and prevent them from picking the elected officials of their choice. And now he's literally saying he's going to remove the representatives that the people have put into office. So he's taken
that's not what he said. He says he's going to remove the people who aren't in office. He's talking about removing the people that have abdicated their post. If you want to stay in office, he's not saying that he's going to remove you from office. He's saying you're not in office. You're fleeing your office. You're running from your responsibility. James, surely you can understand that. Anyway, folks, I'm out of time here today. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. SDG.